Hi, uh, my name's Brian, and I work for this little startup called Microsoft. You might have heard of it. I'm a cloud developer advocate, which I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that means. That's just a lot of like random words stuck together, and I don't know exactly what it means, but that's what I do. Been doing that for a couple months now. We're going to be talking about Webpack and Babel. Also very tiny open source projects. Just kidding. Quite large. Just so I know who I'm talking to here. Who here is like a front-end developer primarily? Really cool. Back-end developers? Full stack developers? Okay. I don't get that word either, but cool. Designers? Any designers in the room? Cool. Then what am I missing? I don't know. Secretaries? Just kidding. Cool. So, my name is Brian, and I'm on this podcast. It's called Friend Happy Hour, which is literally just people getting drunk and talking about JavaScript. It's the whole premise of the show. There's not any more complicated than that. It's pretty fun. I do this thing called Front-End Masters. That's why some people know who I am. It's a pretty cool platform for learning JavaScript-y stuff. I used to work at this company, LinkedIn, which, if you want to split ends, is actually Microsoft as well. So I also used to work at Microsoft. Worked at this company, Netflix. No one uses that, right? At least no one pays for it. I used to work at this company as well, Reddit. Does anyone in here use Reddit? And the rest of you are lying. Okay. I used to live in Utah. That's where I'm originally from. Go Jazz. They're probably not going to get any further in the playoffs. That's okay. No one here cares. That's cool. I used to live in Italy for a long time, so go Juve. That's probably controversial to say here. Usually in America, people say, "What? What is that? I don't understand what you're talking about." And I just moved to Seattle like 2 weeks ago. Even though I've only been there for like 2 days, technically that's where I live right now. Okay. And that's my dog, who is adorable. That is a real dog. Okay. So, now let's stop talking about me. Today we're going to be talking about front-end web performance, just kind of in general. Someone tweeted this out a couple months ago. Maybe at this point it's probably over 6 months ago. And I really don't like this tweet. Some of you probably know who this is, and we're not going to name names today, but I really don't like this tweet. I absolutely agree with the fundamental premise that the web is for everyone, that the web should be accessible to everyone. But this is just kind of, it's bullshit to me, because I feel like we're trying our best, right? Let me actually just read the tweet to you. I only ask that frameworks put warnings on their products when they can't be accessible, e.g. this site best viewed with a high net worth. The fundamental premise being that if you go to a website that's really heavy and you're on 2G network in the middle of India, can't load it, right? And this is just snarky bullshit. Like, I'd rather someone say something like, how can we help people, how can we make this easier for people, rather than just sit there and like framework shame people. So I've been guilty of it, I've done it too, but hopefully we can kind of approach this on a more positive basis, on a more maybe ethical basis, rather than just being an asshole about it. So everyone here is just really trying to survive on like several axes, right? We're trying to keep our jobs. We're trying to ship products. We're trying to like not run out of money at our startups. You know, all these kind of things. We're trying to just survive in what we're doing. So this idea that you need to spend 3 times as much, you know, effort and time working on your product just so it can work on 2G when you're trying to sell like high-end helicopter rentals doesn't make a ton of sense, right? If you're selling helicopter rentals, it's probably okay if it works just on 4G, right? Okay, so I guess the first thing is you need to, like, not everything has to work on a 2G phone in the middle of India, like during monsoon season, right? Some things you just need to have work in appropriate settings. So I guess the first thing is know your audience, right? If you know your audience, then you can start designing for them. Like if you are trying to, you know, sell cattle rights in like backcountry Montana, which is where I was born, Yeah, it's got to work on 2G because those farmers are out in the middle of nowhere and they need to be able to access that site. So if it's using like, 6 megabytes to download your page, yeah, you're going to have a problem. Not many people are going to use your website. So know your audience. That's the big thing. It's like be like looking at Google Analytics or whatever you use for your analytics suite and do all those things to make sure that you understand fundamentally who is visiting your website and figure out why, maybe people aren't visiting your websites because your website's too slow. So yeah, not every app needs to work on a 2G phone. That being said, today we're going to be talking about making stuff work on 2G phones. So we're going to start at the bottom. I'm going to show you all the techniques to kind of get it to work on these kind of phones, and then you can kind of adjust the levels of like depending on what your website is, right? Maybe you don't need to apply all of these techniques. You just apply some of them, right? Cool? Okay. So just to give you kind of the idea of scale here, 2G, it's the old cellular network technology. I don't know about you, but anytime my phone's on 2G, it says like, it doesn't work, and I just stop using it. I go find Wi-Fi somewhere because it's so slow. So that's 14 kilobits per second, 3G, and I'm going off a CDMA, which I realize Europe doesn't have a ton of CDMA, but that's what Verizon uses in the US. Anyway, what's the other one? G something? Anyone know? No? Okay, doesn't matter. Yeah, something. Anyway, so there's another one that's AT&T, and most of Europe uses. That's what 3G is. It's roughly 144 kilobits per second. LTE, 4G, that's at its peak, which is definitely not what you're getting all the time, but it's fast. It's fast enough for them almost anything. You can stream definitely HD Netflix on 4G. You're probably getting pretty, actually no, you could definitely do 4K on that as well. Yeah, you could do 4K on LTE as well. And then gigabit fiber, if you have a gigabit service, that's what it is. It's a million kilobits per second. Okay? So this is what 2G is. How many of you had one of these? I sure as shit did. So this is one of the upgraded models, the 56 kilobits per second, and I want you to keep in mind that 2G is like a quarter slower than this, right? So if you remember dialing up on the old internet and like waiting for shit to load and just like having like a tic-tac-toe game going or something like that just because you had to wait so long, that's what 2G feels like. And it's actually even worse today because all of our websites today are far bigger than they used to be. Back then, everything was designed to work on these like much smaller pipes, and so everything worked a little bit better. But now when you're trying to load websites that are 2 megabytes and 3 megabytes big, it's just so frustratingly slow. So 2G is slower, and because the web is so bloated now. And bloated in the sense like, it's bloated in the sense that like we're including a bunch of stuff that we don't really have to, but also the internet's getting faster, so it's a balance. So we're gonna do a bit of an experiment today. I'm going to make you watch LinkedIn.com load on 2G. No one look away, I'm watching you. If anyone looks at their phone, I'm gonna throw this at you, okay? Are you ready for this? Let's go. It is going, you can see the little thing up there in the top. It is going. So we're about 9 seconds in at this point. Nothing has happened. 11, 17, still nothing on the screen. 24 seconds, nothing is still rendered on the screen. Okay, there's a thing out there now. Now we can at least know 30 seconds in, it is loading. It did not time out on you. It's 40 seconds in, still loading. Okay, now at 42, we're starting to get real content on the page. Like, who do you think has stuck around at this point? Literally no one, right? Literally no one has stuck around this long. And we're still not done. So we're past a minute at this point. And just now we're finally starting to get some content on the screen, okay? So this is 1.2 minutes-ish. Are we done yet? No, we're not done yet. Just painful, right? Okay, yeah, we're done now. So that took 1.3 minutes to load. LinkedIn.com, huge company. The reason why I show you this one is because I used to work on it, so I am part of this problem, though not this particular page. So that sucks. Like I think it's important for you to realize that, like, and watch this, because if you're gonna go write a website and then expect someone on slow 2G to load your website, and it's, what was that, 2.3 megabytes? That's not that big. Like, compared to some of the websites out there, I remember going to, there's a really crappy chain restaurant in the US called Red Robin, which will make you fat, so don't eat there. But it had like 6 megabytes just in images on the website, right? That's just images. So, like, this is like untenable. So that's partially for page weight, that's partially because it's using a web framework, which is quite slow with regards to how this works. So, now that I've done that again, I'm gonna make you watch another website. Unless you want to, do you want to watch this one again? Did anyone miss it? Okay, no, we got it, cool. So, we're gonna watch another one. This is Treebo.com, which is I've never used it before, but I'm told it is a good priced like motel, hotel experience in India. Okay, exact same speed, and we're going to load it now. So within a quarter second, you had instant paint. Within maybe 4 seconds, it was more or less usable, right? And I think the whole thing takes 12 seconds. Yeah, 12 seconds and the thing is totally done. Same speeds, and that is unbelievable, right? So if we want to be really honest about this, if it's competition, Bangalore is kicking Silicon Valley's ass, like hardcore, right? Now, to be totally fair, like LinkedIn has other ways of being accessed. There's a light version of the website, and I loaded the desktop experience, and I purposely chose like a feed that had a lot of pictures in it. Like, I wanted to make my point, and I think I succeeded. But I was optimizing for the worst possible experience. But I wanted to show you, like, this is not atypical. You could find ones that are a lot worse than this. Just that one was kind of bad. So, LinkedIn is a huge company. I think there's like 1,200 employees, or 1,200, no, 17,000 employees, and there's like 1,200 engineers just working on on those sorts of problems. So it's not a staffing problem. It's a problem that they just haven't prioritized that sort of thing. And you would think something like LinkedIn could be very, very useful and very, very used, right? Highly used in India if they would just put some effort into it. Okay. So does anyone feel bad at this point? If you don't feel bad at this point, then I'm going to make you watch the website again. So, feel bad. So, what do? This is how I feel most of the time. It's like I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm a college dropout. Like, I didn't go to school and learn like all these kind of like crazy algorithms and like stuff like that. So, I always kind of feel like I'm drifting off in space trying to grasp at straws. So, I'm going to give you a handful of things you could go do. Some of them are really hard to do. Some of them are so easy that you should already be doing them. So, hopefully you get some things that you can take away back to your day job, back to your side projects, back to whatever you're doing, and apply them to those sorts of things. So, the first thing I want you to do, obviously changing frameworks is kind of a hard thing to do, but when you're designing new projects, these are things you can think about. So question your framework. So the name of this talk is 10 kilobytes or bust, right? If you choose anything but Preact on this list, you have already lost the game. So sorry, you just give up. I think that's my, no, I'm just kidding. I love Preact. I love the people that work on Preact. I just kind of love everything about Preact. So I do suggest looking at Preact for your next project. It works extremely well, and especially the only fact that it's only 3.5 kilobytes. Jason Miller, who is the guy that writes it, is a goddamn wizard. Honestly, I have no idea how he does half the things that he does, but he's awesome. So 3.5 kilobytes on 2G, that's 0.1 seconds. So I'm pretty sure that's what Treebo is using. In fact, I'm sure. That's what Treebo is using was Preact. Okay? Your next option is Vue. Vue is a kind of a hot new framework. It's not really that new, actually, but it is now hot in the JavaScript world. Really cool stuff. Evan Yu, the guy that writes it, is also really, really smart. 21.4, that's definitely not bad. You're in 0.7 seconds for just your framework to load then. And that still sucks, right? 0.7 seconds just for your framework. That's nothing you wrote. That's none of any of the other libraries or anything like that. So even still, tenable, I would say. React, which is what I've written for most of my career. That's what Reddit uses, Netflix, not LinkedIn. LinkedIn uses Ember. And at Microsoft now, mostly what I write is React. So 32.7, that's of this morning. That's 16.3. Not too bad. It used to be 45 before version 16, so they're doing better, getting better, and they have some stuff coming that's going to make it even better, but that's pretty far off. Angular, 59.8. You're in 2 seconds just to load Angular. That's kind of hard to swallow. That being said, they have something called Ivy coming, which I'll talk about later. Lastly, if you are going to choose Ember, which people that write Ember can write stuff really quickly, I would kind of call it the Rails of the front-end world, that you could just like scaffold stuff up and just keep going. 144 kilobytes, 4.81 seconds just to load your framework. This is just downloading, right? It's also not execution time. So something like 144 kilobytes takes a while to execute as well, right? You're in, I don't know, I'm not going to guess, but it's going to be on the order of hundreds of milliseconds just to execute that as well. It sucks. So if you're aiming for India, something like Ember, something like Angular, something maybe even like React, kind of non-starters. So most of us, from when we were using Babel, used that top one for the longest time. Babel preset ES 2015 basically said, transpile my code from futuristic JavaScript back to something that would work in 2015, or rather something that would work with ES5, which is the older version of JavaScript. That's been around so long, it got so common that now everyone doesn't even think about it. They just throw in Babel preset ES 2015 and call it good. Well, it's 2018 now, and browsers have gotten a lot further along, and the market share of those older browsers like, I don't know, IE11, those shitty one from Microsoft, mostly have gone away at this point. Companies are just beginning to stop support for Internet Explorer and are now moving towards Edge, which Edge is actually a really great browser. So something like Babel ES 2015, it's transpiling your code way too much, right? A lot of browsers now can understand the modern syntax like arrow functions, constant let, classes, those sorts of things are natively supported in the browser, so you don't actually have to transpile them to the old things. The reason why you want to do this is it's less code you have to include, which is always a good thing, and the browsers can start optimizing for these new patterns, which is also a good thing. It'll make your code go faster. So our friends at Babel created a thing called Babel preset env. What this is it will transpile your code for the last 2 versions by default. You can set it to whatever support range you need to cover. It'll cover the last 2 versions of the browsers that have been released, right? So if we're on Firefox 65, it'll cover 64 and 63, and it'll cover Chrome 61 and 60 and 59. And then as they release new browsers, 62 and 63, it'll move that support forward, so it's only covering 61 and 60 instead of 59 and 60, right? Does that make sense? So by doing that, your code is progressively going to transpile less and less of those features. So this is really awesome because you don't have to do anything, right? You just install this and it just kind of happens. I love things I don't have to do, right? So, it's something else that someone else has to do. So if your code, if you're using Babel right now in production and you are not using preset env, go do it. Like, this is definitely like the easiest take home. It's just drop it in, shit just fixes itself. It's awesome. Okay. So, compile your code twice with Babel. This is actually a really interesting technique that one of my colleagues at Netflix and LinkedIn, he's now at Google, Chris Baxter kind of came up with, or at least in conjunction with some other people. When you output your bundle, compile it twice. You're going to compile it once with this ES module's true syntax. What it's going to do is your browser has this, do I have it on here? Nope. Oh, right there. So right here, this type equals module right here, only super modern browsers support that. So if you have an older browser and it sees that type equals module, it just ignores it, and then it can go on and download something else, right? So you'll give it down there, this one right here is kind of the follow-up. So you'll have one that will load first, this type equals module, only in modern browsers. What that means is this compiles with fewer transformations, right? So it means modern browsers, which is hopefully most of your user base, will get just like this very bare minimum transformation, and then everyone else will get like everything that they need, right? So you won't break it for older people, but you'll make it faster for people using newer browsers. It's a really interesting technique. I've seen people using it at Google, and it works. So check that out. It's kind of it's a bit of work to set up, but it's worth it if you have the cycles to do it. All right, let's tree shake. So tree shaking, yeah. Tree shaking is the idea that if you have this giant library, something like Lodash or underscore, I think most of us are familiar with that if you've written any amount of JavaScript. It's this big utility library. It's basically the standard library for JavaScript that we don't have, but we do have Lodash, right? Lodash is huge. I think it has something like 200 or 300 methods on it. I only ever use like maybe 10 methods on it at most. I don't think, is there anyone in here that has used every method in Lodash? Oh, good. No one knows it. Like, you'd be lying if you said yes, because no one has used it. Like, I doubt even, you know, the creators of it have used every method on it. So, something like Lodash, we're only using 10 methods on it, so why are we including all of it, right? It's a pretty big library. You can see down there, I put right there, this here, just these 2 lines of code, 73.3 kilobytes, right? It's because Lodash is a pretty big library. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use env, and I'm going to use modules false. This is going to let Webpack handle the modules instead of Babel. This is important because otherwise Babel is going to mess it up for you. And then I'm going to change this to import get from Lodash ES, which is built with ES modules in mind. And then using that, I'm going to do the exact same code that I had before, right? By doing that, I cut out 60 kilobytes of Lodash. So let's explain how that works just a little bit. We switched from using require, which I have back here, require. This is CommonJS. This is the old way of doing modules with JavaScript, to the ES6 way of doing modules, which is this, import from, right? Import from, using this syntax allows your code to be analyzed statically, and it can say, hey, you're only using this part of Lodash, and I can see that you're never calling the rest of Lodash. I'm just not going to include it in your bundle at all, right? Whereas if you use this one, the CommonJS one, this is dynamic, right? This is actually a function call that's going out to Lodash, right? And that's dynamic, right? So it could be anything going in there, so therefore it cannot be analyzed ahead of time because it could be anything. So that's what Webpack is doing here. It's leveraging this ability to do static analysis on your code, and it's just cutting out stuff. This is called tree shaking. Another word for this would be live code inclusion. which is weird. You would think it'd be dead code elimination, which is different, similar, not the same. Tree shaking is live code inclusion. Okay, so this is the bundler output. This is the one that we just did with using ESGet, right? This one right here. So you can see here that low-es, it's including, I'm going to guess, maybe 30 modules, like 30 function stuff to get that just that particular thing. That's a lot, right? I mean, it's like 10 kilobytes of stuff for one function that you can probably write yourself, but nonetheless, not that bad. I want to show you what it looks like if you include everything. An unbelievable amount, right? Like you can't even read it. So it's going back here. You can see here, where's my code? Yeah, right there. Index.js, that's my code. Going back here, it's down there in the bottom right. Like that's crazy. Okay. Tree shaking is no silver bullet. I laughed way too hard when I thought of this. Because it's a bullet, and I made it silver. Anyway, fine. I thought it was funny. Okay. So, use built-ins. Oh, yeah, anyway, let's talk about why it's not a silver bullet. So, if I do tree shaking on React, it does absolutely nothing. Why? Because React is a library where you actually use every part of that library. If you use tree shaking on it, it's using everything in it, right? So if you're doing live code inclusion, it includes everything, right? That's why it's no silver bullet. Like it works with things like Lodash, where it's like a bunch of disparate modules, which is awesome. But for things like React, it's going to include everything. Furthermore, with your code, the code that you're writing, hopefully you're using most of the code that you write. Otherwise, I don't really know what your job is. So that's why it's no silver bullet. Like it only works on certain things in certain situations. Like maybe you can use it to like cut out debug code, I guess, or things that you would have just for like not for production use. Or you have libraries like Lodash. Like those are really the only kind of times that tree shaking is helpful. But nonetheless, it's not so hard to switch to, so check it out if you can. I gotta make sure how much time do I have left here. I got time. Gotta go faster though. Okay, use built-ins. This is a new feature with Babel 7, I believe. If you can't tell, I'm a huge Babel fan. So, I have these things here, AJS, we'll just look at A, you can ignore B for the moment. And I want to make a new promise, right? Promises are supported in most modern browsers, actually every modern browser, and have been for quite some time, right? They've been out since even before, since 2014 at least. So if your environment that you specify with preset env doesn't support it, then it's going to do right inline this import core.js modules es6.promise, and right above it, and then it uses the promise right after that. This takes advantage of the fact that when you're doing Babel transformations, these imports, even if you import something like 90 times, you still get one copy of it. So it's not a big deal to import something multiple times. But then the awesome part about it is if they do support promises, then you just get promise. You don't get the polyfill at all. You don't get any of these imports. It just works really well. So that's what this use built-ins usage is. If you're using Babel 7, use it for sure. If you're not using Babel 7, then go upgrade to Babel 7. That's a pretty easy one. Okay, so loose mode. This is another one that's been around in Babel for quite some time. I do have a slide here. Okay, so you can ignore the actual code up here. Don't try and read it. It's probably not even readable. So when you are doing, including things like for in loops, for example, which are for of loops, which are newish to JavaScript, right? They came out with ES 2015. If you include everything for all the edge cases, you get something like here on the left. I think this is for classes, actually. They have like a bunch of like crazy edge cases that, unless you're doing like weird stuff with your classes, which most of us don't, we don't need all that stuff. If you just do this thing here on the right, this covers like 99% of use cases. It just doesn't cover the crazy edge cases. So one, Don't explore the crazy edge cases. That's just general life advice for you right there. And then the second one is, yeah, just use loose mode, and then you just don't get all this crazy polyfill stuff. So that'll make your bundle size go down pretty quickly as well. Some people like get like scared, like, well, I want to be using like the most spec compliant code ever, blah blah blah, and this is I've been doing this for, you know, like since loose mode's been around. It's been some years, and it's literally never bitten me in the ass before. Okay. Build using node-env equals production. Really hope you're doing that one. That's Slack. Slack got in trouble for not doing that. They were including React in development mode. It's just a party foul. Just don't do it. React runs like literally 100 times slower if you don't bundle using node-env equals production. So that's one that you can again go home right now and do. It costs you nothing. Just please do it. A lot of code compiles differently when it's in production mode. That's where that comes from. Code splitting. So 10 kilobytes or bust, that's the name of the talk, right? The only way that you're going to get 10 kilobytes or less on that first page load is you have to use code splitting. Simply put, modern JavaScript applications are getting more and more complicated to the point that you can't make an entire application in 10 kilobytes. Let me phrase that. You're not going to make like a very robust one. Like there's no way you can make Gmail in 10 kilobytes or less. Like that's impossible, right? However, your first page load can definitely be 10 kilobytes, which is going to download just enough code to get your page up and running, and then it's going to load the rest of the bundles that it needs ad hoc, like as it's needed. So definitely look into code splitting. It does make your code more complicated, but it's a really important technique to lower that initial page download. Don't include source maps in production. Like I wish this was just an obvious thing to say. Apparently it's not. Do I have it in here? No, I don't. Oh, but if you include source maps, it'll literally make your bundle like 4 or 5 times bigger. Like it's just insane. Like just make sure that you are not including source maps in production. Source maps are very useful for debugging. So if I'm like writing CoffeeScript or something like that, 1, I'm sorry, but 2, it's going to include everything that you need to like cross-reference your CoffeeScript to your JavaScript, right? I probably offended someone. I'm sorry. Okay. So scope hoisting. This is kind of it's a recent thing for Webpack, but Rollup has been doing this for some time. If you've not heard of Rollup, it's a really cool library. That's another bundler that is made for bundling your code, but it specifically works extremely well for libraries. So all of your favorite libraries like React and Angular and some of those, they're all bundling with Rollup because it's better for libraries. I wouldn't say use this for your applications. Don't use Rollup for your applications. Continue using things like Webpack for that. But Rollup does do this thing called scope hoisting that recently, I think at this point it'd be like 6 or 7 months ago, Webpack also started allow you doing with this thing called the module concatenation plugin. Let's see if I can explain a little bit what this does. So the difference here is kind of subtle, but bear with me for a second. So here we have this helper function. Assume this helper is some module they're including from some other package, right? You have this Webpack require method, and this will bring in that particular helper so that here, when you call it var value equals helper right there, that it can use it, right? So this require method thing, it can be a bit heavy, right? And then the other thing is that it requires all this like wiring code that comes with Webpack. Like I don't know if you know this, but Webpack actually includes a decent amount of code every time that you use it, right? It's just all the stuff that like does all the wiring up of your modules for you. You can avoid that if you use this module concatenation plugin. So rather than having this require method, which is again quite heavy, it just takes your function and literally just sticks it right there, right? It sticks it in the scope so that you can just call it right there. And so down here, you just call helper, and it's just normal JavaScript calling the helper. Now you look at that and say, like, that really can't make that much faster. It actually does, and it actually can cut out quite a bit of code. You can see here from this guy, Jeremy, I'm trying to remember where he works. Some place that you probably would have heard of. And he said they went from 70 kilobytes to 37 just by putting in that module concatenation plugin. Now, I've been told by Sean, who also works with Microsoft with me, he's the Larkin guy right there, that it's not, at today for Webpack 4, which is what we're on, it doesn't work for everyone. I don't know what those edge cases are, but it's something you should definitely explore, upgrading to Webpack 4. In the future, I think they're going to try and move everyone to it to the point that a future version of Webpack might be just on by default. In fact, I think that they're already working towards that today. How much time do I have? What, 5 minutes? Cool. All right, buckle up, we're going faster. Image skeletons. These are loading images kind of, if I have big images, I'll load like some kind of like image placeholder in place of it. So you can see there, these are SVGs, and they are significantly smaller than their full-size image, and I will load those first. So you'll see things like this, which I think is pretty cool, right? It lets people know like what's kind of going to be there, and then they show up, which is I think is really cool. Or you can do something like this. You can do SVGs with animations. And these like SVGs again are really, really small, and then you're hurrying and loading your images in the background. So I think they're really cool. So you can do what's called blur up. I think Facebook does that they make like a really blurry image and then it loads the full image after that. You can do solid colors, placeholders, or even just a box. But defer loading of images if you can, because those are, as you might imagine, quite expensive in terms of page weight. So I was just messing around, and by not including my images, I cut down by like 2 images, or 2 megabytes. Cool, crazy stuff. Okay. So initial payloads under 10 kilobytes. I will post these online. We will recap later. Okay, so I work at Microsoft. I work with functions a lot, so I'm just going to give you some functions advice. If you want to sign up and mess around with functions, I gave you a little vanity link there, Codemotion-10KB. You will get some free credits. I think it's up to $200. Which I think you get anyway, so don't think I'm giving you a special deal, so as much as I would like to. Okay, reduce time to first byte. Server timings API. This is really useful if you want to see what's slowing you down. You basically attach a header that has information about like what was taking time in the back end, and then you can see them in the development tools. I think this is Chrome, but it works for Firefox and Edge and things like that. So you can see here it says like your MySQL query took this long, your total CPU, your caching, blah, 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 all that stuff. Compress your responses. The only reason I say this is when I started at LinkedIn, I found out they were not compressing any of their API responses. It's a huge party foul. Always compress your responses. It's literally just free performance. It's just free. Just do that. Okay, so go check. Go check because you think they're doing it and they're not. Okay, BROTLI. BROTLI compression, this is better than gzipping most of the time. However, it takes longer to do. So it'll make your build process take longer. Not every browser supports it, but you can see here, this is from LinkedIn. This improved quite a bit page loads for the US because the US uses modern browsers for the most part. So check out BROTLI, that might work for you. You can see here the support for it is okay. We'll go with okay. Cold start. So one problem with Azure functions and just in general functions is that when you start them, loading them takes a long time, and because module resolution takes a decent amount of time. So one thing you can do is use a thing called Azure Function Pack, which is literally just Webpack built for functions. It does all the module resolution for you. So definitely check that out if you're into doing functions. In the future, computers are the future. This is from Henry, the core maintainer of Babel. He said that they're going to try and do loose mode by detection, so you don't have to tell it to do loose mode. It's just going to detect that. And if you're not hitting any of those edge cases, that it will do that for you. Ahead of time compilation, this is something Angular does today. It does a bunch of optimizations just for you on the fly, inlining stuff and such. Partial evaluation, there's a thing called pre-pack coming, which I will show you right here. You can see here that I do function hello, function world, and this is what it evaluates to. It actually runs your code for you in advance, which is pretty cool. Or you can see here, this is the Fibonacci sequence. It's recursive. It does all that and is like, okay, you called it with function Fibonacci 23. I'm going to evaluate that. And that's actually just this number, right? So that's coming. It's really cool. It's not really ready yet, but Facebook's working hard on it. Disappearing frameworks. Svelte is one of them. It's really cool, from the same guy that did Rollup. And Angular Ivy. Angular Ivy actually compiles down to web components. It's 3.2 kilobytes for a hello world with Angular Ivy. So really cool stuff. Binary bytecode. Svelte is thinking about doing this. Glimmer 2, which is what that logo is. That's the rendering engine for Ember. Actually compiles all of your stuff down to binary and sends that down the wire. Also really cool. And this is kind of like the futuristic stuff of doing a Hacker News clone. The TTI for a pre-act Hacker News clone is 1.92. Anyway, check this out. I'll put this chart online. And OK, I'm done. Thank you.